Namaste and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class. Om Sarva Jiva Papanashakaranam Bhaveshwaram Swikritang cha garbhavasa deha pashamidrisham Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Tannamami deva deva Ramakrishnam Ishwaram Om Shri Vivekanandari Satchishya Supujitaya Shri Sharada Devya Virata Sevitaya Shri Ramakrishna Paramahamsaya Avatara Varishtaya Chate Namaha Om Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Karma Shapaham Shravana Mangalam Shrimadattatam Bhuvi grinanti ye bhurida jana. So today we will continue with the chapter on Sri Ramakrishna with the devotees at Dakshineshwar, part 1. And that is on June 4th, 1883. And in this book, it is halfway down page 232. So on this day, it was a Monday morning, and several devotees had come. M had spent the night there. Rakal was there. Balaram had come. And so we continue where we left off. After his noon meal, the master took a short rest. And that, I should say, for those not familiar with the traditional customs in India, the noon meal usually would be actually before noon, like after 11 or something like that, was usually, and that's still in our ashramas. Usually, most of our ashramas in India, like Belur Mutt, the noon meal is like a little after 11 o'clock. So after his noon meal, the master took a short rest. Mani Malik, an old member of the Brahmo Samaj, entered the room and sat down after saluting the master, who was still lying on his bed. Manilal asked him questions now and then, and the master, still half asleep, answered with a word or two. Manilal said that Shivanath admired Nitya Gopal's spiritual state. The master asked in a sleepy tone what they thought of Hajra. Now that we have no idea why Sri Ramakrishna asked what do they think of Hajra. Perhaps it was to show that depending on what they said about Hajra, whether they understood true spirituality or not, because Hajra was always pretending to be a highly spiritual soul. But he was, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, he was a hypocrite. And so I don't know, but that's possibly why he asked, what do they think of Hajra? Because, of course, there was not much comparison between Hajra and Nitya Gopal. Nitya Gopal was a young man who would come to Sri Ramakrishna and who was, as Sri Ramakrishna said, in the state of a Paramahamsa, that is, in a very high state. And he would frequently go into ecstasy and into abstracted states. But later in the gospel, we will see that Sri Ramakrishna says, now I see that Nitya Gopal does not belong to this place. He is not one of the inner circle. And so But anyway, at this time, Sri Ramakrishna spoke highly of Nitya Gopal. And that's what Shivanath Shastri. Oh, one other thing, Shivanath Shastri was a Brahmo leader, a preacher of the Brahmo Samaj, and one of the leaders. And he had said that Sri Ramakrishna, by thinking so much about God, he would fall unconscious, and as if he were having an epileptic fit or something. And so Sri Ramakrishna scolded him the next time he saw Shivanath, after Shivanath had spread this idea, and said, do you think that by thinking of consciousness itself, one goes unconscious? What kind of talk is this? So Shivanath's spiritual understanding, though Sri Ramakrishna loved Shivanath as he had loved Keshav Chandra Sen, he fully knew Shivanath's limitations, spiritual limitations and limitations of understanding. Then Sri Ramakrishna sat up on his bed and told Manilal about Bhavanath's devotion to God. Master, what an exalted state he is in. He has hardly begun to sing about God before his eyes fill with tears. The very sight of Harish made him ecstatic. He said that Harish was very lucky. He made the remark because Harish was spending a few days here now and then, away from his home. So Bhavanath was a frequent visitor to Sri Ramakrishna and a great young devotee, a young man. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna would say that Bhavanath had the nature of a woman, while Narendra had the nature of a man. And that Harish, who is mentioned, that Bhavanath said, oh, Harish is so lucky because he gets to spend a few days with Sri Ramakrishna. Later, Harish had a tragic episode in his life after Sri Ramakrishna had passed away. His wife, Harish also was a young man, his wife became enraged that Harish was not paying enough attention to her. And so she hired a tantrika to cast a spell on Harish to increase his lust. And obviously that worked. Holy Mother herself said not about that, but said about other things, that these are sciences that we have to, that we can't deny. And so this tantrika cast a spell on Harish, increased his lust tremendously. And so there was the incident after Sri Ramakrishna passed away where Harish went down to Jairambati to see the Holy Mother when he was overcome with this spell of the tantrika. And he chased the Holy Mother and he ran around her cottage again and again until she saw that she was not going to be able to outrun him. And so then she turned around, faced him, threw him on the ground. Again, Holy Mother was not a big, heavy woman. She was delicate. But she confronted him, threw him on the ground, kneeled on his chest, grabbed his tongue. And I don't know how you grab somebody's tongue. That's not easy to do. But it says in the story, she grabbed his tongue and kept slapping him in the face and slapped him silly until others could come and take Harish away. So anyway, that's not pertinent here, but it is the later story about Harish that was very tragic because he was a very good devotee. Since I mentioned that incident tied to Harish, let me say the question arises, Harish had gone to Sri Ramakrishna and was a very good devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, devoted to him. Sri Ramakrishna loved him. So how could such a thing happen to a person? So the only answer for that, there are two answers, neither of which will satisfy the skeptic. But they do satisfy one who is devoted. One answer is that there must have been something in his past karma that required that working out. And you see in the lives of some of those who came to Sri Ramakrishna and later some of those who came to Swami Vivekananda. And though I don't know, well, I do know, that must have happened to those who came to Holy Mother also. That somebody coming to Sri Ramakrishna, Swamiji, or Holy Mother, then they were in their last life, or at most they had one more life to work out, as in the case of Mathur Babu, who served Sri Ramakrishna so devotedly. But at the most, they had another life to work out, or in this life itself, they were going to be liberated. And so that meant that whatever karma had to be worked out, it had to be worked out quickly. Some karma can just be burnt up through the fire of illumination, but other karma, which is already on the docket to be experienced, has to be experienced. That's why after Jivan Mukti, a person continues to live in this world, because there's prarabdha karma which has already begun to fructify, that must be experienced. And so I've seen this in the case of several people, that there were things that came to them that you wonder, how could that happen to a person who had taken refuge in Sri Ramakrishna or Swamiji or Holy Mother? But it was because they had to finish their karma in this life, because this was it. And so the movie of their life was speeded up, and the things that had to happen, they happened to them, so that they could be completely free. So that's one explanation, and that I'm convinced that that is true. Another explanation is not really an explanation, but once someone asked Holy Mother, why so-and-so, and I don't even know who they were referring to, why so-and-so had fallen from the spiritual path. And Holy Mother, or had not fallen from the spiritual path, but had fallen. They stayed on the spiritual path, but they had had a severe fall on the path. And asked, how could this happen to so-and-so? And Holy Mother said, who knows what Sri Ramakrishna is working out through his devotees. That is, that we see only a narrow slice of life, a cross-sectional slice of life. But if we could see the whole picture, then many of these, or all of these things, would be understood. It's because we don't see the whole picture that it looks random, or it looks unfair, or whatever. Again, if we could see the whole picture, we would see how it fit in with everything that needed to happen. Swami Prabhavananda used to say to people who would criticize somebody coming to the Vedanta Center in Hollywood, a devotee or someone, they would criticize them and say, "Oh, Maharaj, why do you allow such and such a person to come here? They're not a good person. You shouldn't allow them to come here." And Swami Prabhavananda would say, "Don't judge them until you see the whole story. Don't judge them until the end." That is, that as a person is working out their karma, you never know what is going to arise. But if you know the whole picture, you know that there was something there that had to come out, and something of it had to be experienced before they could cross over it. There's some experiences that we can bypass. They're not necessary. We just brush them off. There are other experiences that demand expression. And so without knowing the whole picture, we shouldn't criticize others. Because if we could see the whole picture, we would see that that there was a sense to what was going on. So Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "Well, what is the cause of bhakti? Why should the spiritual feeling of young boys like Bhavanath be awakened?" Im remained silent. "Master, the fact is, all men may look alike from the outside, but some of them have fillings of condensed milk. Cakes may have fillings of condensed milk or powdered black gram, but they all look alike from the outside. The desire to know God, ecstatic love of Him, and such other spiritual qualities are the condensed milk." So again, referring to Indian sweets, certain sweets that have a filling from the outside, and that, of course, is a common experience around the world. That probably every culture has some sort of thing that's wrapped in a dough or wrapped in some sort of food substance, and inside it's stuffed with a filling. But that filling can be something delicious like condensed milk, or it can be something very plain like black gram, powdered black gram. And so with people, we who can't can't see the insides of people, we see people like looking at the sweets arranged in a display shelf in a sweet shop without labels. You don't know what is inside the sweet, what filling it contains. And that is our case. Sri Ramakrishna, however, he could see the innermost heart of everyone that came to him. And so he could see the filling. So for us from the outside, we see a person and we don't know what their nature is by seeing them. But the nature of people is different depending on their past karma, their spiritual sensitivity, etc. Sri Ramakrishna spoke reassuringly to the devotees. Master to M. Some think, oh, I am a bound soul. I shall never acquire knowledge and devotion. But if one receives the Guru's grace, one has nothing to fear. Once a tigress attacked a flock of goats. As she sprang on her prey, she gave birth to a cub and died. The cub grew up in the company of the goats. The goats ate grass, and the cub followed their example. They bleated. The cub bleated too. Gradually, it grew to be a big tiger. One day, another tiger attacked the same flock. It was amazed to see the grass-eating tiger. Running after it, the wild tiger at last seized it, whereupon the grass-eating tiger began to bleat. The wild tiger dragged it to the water and said, "Look at your face in the water. It's just like mine. Here is a little meat. Eat it." Saying this, it thrust some meat into its mouth, but the grass-eating tiger would not swallow it and began to bleat again. Gradually, however, it got the taste for blood and came to relish the meat. Then the wild tiger said, "Now you see there is no difference between you and me. Come along and follow me into the forest. So there can be no fear if the Guru's grace descends on one. He will let you know who you are and what your real nature is." So that's a story, of course, we're familiar with. That is one that Swami Vivekananda told here also, though when he told it in the form of a sheep, that the story of the sheep lion, that is exactly the same story, that a pregnant, in this case a goat, will stick with Sri Ramakrishna's version. The goat was attacked by a tiger, and the fright of the attack caused the pregnant goat to give birth to its baby. And then the baby was adopted by the baby. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting the animals mixed up. So I got focused on the goat and forgot about the tiger. So the tiger was pregnant, and it attacked a flock of goats. But in the exertion of attacking the goats, it gave birth and died. And so the baby tiger grew up among the goats and thought itself to be a goat. And we've often seen that in nature with the young of one species being adopted by a mother of another species, even when the two animals are natural enemies. But the mother instinct of the one species, which is prey for the other species, takes on through her motherly instinct the nurture of the baby. So that's what happened. And so the tiger grew up thinking itself to be a goat, until another tiger came to attack the same flock and saw this tiger bleating like a goat, eating grass like a goat. And you know the rest of the story. So the story, of course, is used to illustrate our condition, that we are the divine reality itself. We are the lords of the universe, God itself, divinity itself. As Swami Vivekananda said with great lamentation, that man, the infinite dreamer, dreaming finite dreams, that we are the infinite dreamer, the dreamer who has dreamt up this whole universe. And yet we're satisfied with our little dreams of having a little house with a picket fence and getting a nice little car and having a little job and having a little circle of friends. Not that those things are bad things. It's not that those things are immoral or anything wrong with them. It's that we're satisfied with so little, satisfied with so little. When we are one with the divine reality itself, we are the reality of the whole universe. The universe exists within us, not us within the universe. And so, like the tiger in the story, that was adopted by the goats, we grow up thinking we are goats. We grow up thinking that we are small, we are powerless, we are limited. And so the guru is the tiger that comes and grabs the goat tiger and teaches it that you are the same as I am. So at first the goat tiger is terrified when it sees the tiger come, not recognizing that they're the same. And then the tiger takes it to the pond and shows it its reflection, gives it some meat, makes it roar, and then the goat tiger wakes up. Or again, the version of the story we're more used to because Swami Vivekananda told it, the story of the sheep and the lion. So the tiger is replaced by a lion and the goat is replaced by a sheep. So Swami Vivekananda adapted the story more to Western understanding and expectations of the story. It's interesting that this story was taken up by Walt Disney. In fact, Walt Disney took two Vedantic tales and put them in his animated cartoons. Two that I know of. There may be more that I don't know, but at least two that I saw as a kid. One was this story of the lion and the sheep. He took Swami Vivekananda's version. That is presented in, I think it's in Bambi, the film which I saw as a little kid. So that would have been back in the 50s. Of Bambi, that's in this animated feature-length movie. This is exactly the same story. Now, it's not, he doesn't bring in Vedanta and say that you are the Atman, because it's Walt Disney, but he uses the tale. And then in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, he uses the famous Vedantic tale, which is known as Dashamas Twamasi, thou art the 10th. That is, the 10 woodcutters who were walking through the forest and they had to cross a river. And this also, all of you certainly have heard, they cross the river, get to the other side, and because it was a raging torrent of a river, they were afraid, well, did we all make it? I said, well, let's see. Let us count. And so they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He said, oh, but there were 10 of us before, now only 9. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then says, well, one of us must have been lost. Who was it? Where did he go? He must have drowned. And so one by one, all of the woodcutters count, and each one of them counts 9. And so they start weeping and wailing because they've lost one of their members. And then another wise man comes walking past them on the path and asks them why they are weeping. And they said, we were 10 when we went to cross the river, and now having crossed, we're only 9. One of us has drowned. And so the wise man saw immediately what the problem was, that they were counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and not counting themselves. And so he had them count the 9 and then said, Dashamas Twamasi, you are the 10th. And then with that came understanding. And so that was presented in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Seven Dwarfs cross a river in the animated film, and getting to the other side, they do the same thing, though in this case they count up to 6, and they all start weeping because the 7th member is missing. So it's interesting that these two stories were taken up by Walt Disney or by his writers. We don't know that Walt Disney himself was responsible, but either he or his writers put these two Vedantic tales in the Disney productions. In fact, the vice president and creative head of Disney, after Walt Disney passed away, he had worked with Disney but lived beyond him. John Hinch, who was the vice president and creative head of Disney after Disney passed away. He himself was a Vedantin, and he was the president of our Vedanta Society of Southern California for a number of years. So I don't know if it was through him that these stories came in or what. Anyway, back to the text. So Sri Ramakrishna tells the story of the goat and the tiger, and then says, so there can be no fear if the Guru's grace descends on one. He will let you know who you are and what your real nature is. That is, the Guru will let you know that you are divine. You're one with the reality of the universe, one with God. Give you encouragement and wake that something of us, that memory which is within all of us. None of us have completely forgotten who we are. That's why we're not satisfied with anything, because who can satisfy the infinite? The only way we find satisfaction is by realizing once again, remembering our infinite nature. So the Guru takes us to the pool of understanding and shows his reflection and our reflection that which I am, you are also. The reality which I have realized, that is your nature also. So you also wake up. So there can be no fear if the Guru's grace descends in this way on a person, because the Guru reminds us of who we are and shows us the way to realize it. If the devotee practices spiritual discipline a little, the Guru explains everything to him. Then the disciple understands for himself what is real and what is unreal. God alone is real, and the world is illusory. So if he says here that if the devotee practices even a little bit of spiritual discipline, then the Guru explains everything. That is, we have to put forth some effort. I've met people who say that, oh, I'm going to lead a spiritual life. I'm very interested in the spiritual path. I really want to lead a spiritual life, but I haven't found a Guru yet, so I can't start. So when I find a Guru, then I will lead a spiritual life. Well, such people never find a Guru, because they're looking for somebody who's going to jump out at them and say, I'm a Guru and I will give you liberation, and here it is. A person who really wants spirituality, whether they found a Guru or not, they begin doing what they can understand to do. They begin struggling, they begin trying, they begin looking for teaching, they begin thinking about spiritual things and trying to figure out how to go forward. And then a Guru will come in time. Sometimes the Guru may come late in one's spiritual life, sometimes at the beginning of one's spiritual life, or anywhere in between. But sooner or later, the Guru will come, but we have to do what we can do before there's any use to taking a Guru. Just having a Guru by itself, that doesn't do much for us. It's having a Guru who guides us in our path, but we have to be following the path. Then the Guru's help is of great benefit to us. So then Sri Ramakrishna says that then the disciple understands for himself what is real and what is unreal. That God alone is real, the universe is illusory. So that's something, again, that's often discussed in Vedanta and often misunderstood, where it's said that the world is illusory. So let me say two things about that. First of all, we can't give up as illusion the only thing that we have. That is, if I have experienced God, then all of this appears like an illusion by comparison with the intense reality of the divine being. But now when I have no experience of God, this world is real to me, and I can't just think it away, because all of my life is spent aware of this and not aware of God. So you see, to be aware of the illusory nature of this, I have to have some awareness of God. There has to be a comparison, something that I can compare this to, because I see this, I deal with it, it's real to me. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, and at other times, he said that it won't do if you get pricked by a thorn to say, oh, the thorn doesn't exist. No, you're feeling the pain. It's hurting, and you're pretending that the thorn doesn't exist while you're going like that. No, that won't do. We have to recognize what it is that we're experiencing. So as long as I experience this world and don't experience God, then this world will be real to me. But what Sri Ramakrishna and what Vedanta teaches is that this world is impermanent. And that we can understand because we know what permanence means, even if we don't experience it. We can see that everything here is impermanent and that nothing satisfies and that everything comes and goes. That we can understand. So when Sri Ramakrishna and other Vedantic teachers say that this world is illusory, in our present state, we have to understand illusory to mean that it comes and goes. We try to grasp it and it's out of our hands. Everything that we try to grasp in life, we may think that we have it, but it can be taken away from us in a moment by many, many things. And certainly at the time of death, everything is taken away from us. So then we begin to see that, no, there's nothing which is substantial here. But if we begin to come close to God or the self or Brahman, if I begin to have some sense of God, then, and especially if I have some experience, some higher experience, then all of this is seen to be actually an illusion, like a dream. When we're in the dream, it looks very real to us. We take it for real. But when we wake up, we look back and because we have a point of comparison. When we're in the dream, not remembering the waking state to compare the two, in the dream, we're surrounded by the dream world and dream thoughts and dream identity. We take it for real. But when we wake up and look back and say, my God, it was just a dream. Again, because we have a point of comparison. So within this life, as long as this is all we know, the most we can see is that everything here is insubstantial. It comes and it goes. Nothing can be grasped. It's unsatisfactory. It doesn't satisfy the longing of the heart. And so that we can understand. But once we have a spiritual experience, then we see that this is so insubstantial compared to that which I have now experienced. That is so intensely real that now I can see that this is as insubstantial as a dream. Just as we wake up from a dream and see, my God, that was all just in my head, just imagination, just some created out of the thin air by my mind. So one day we'll see that this is equally insubstantial, just created by the mind. In its place, we have a vision of reality. And even if the world continues to be seen, we see it as just a veil floating in the midst of this reality, a thin veil which is quite insubstantial, floating in an ocean, a vast, infinite ocean of reality. So if the devotee practices spiritual discipline a little, again, the same short paragraph, the guru explains everything to him, then the disciple understands for himself what is real and what is unreal. God alone is real and the world is illusory. So then he tells another story. One night, a fisherman went into a garden and cast his net into the lake in order to steal some fish from the owner. The owner heard him and surrounded him with his servants. They brought lighted torches and began to search for him. In the meantime, the fisherman smeared his body with ashes and sat under a tree, pretending to be a holy man. The owner and his men searched a great deal, but could not find the thief. All they saw was a holy man covered with ashes, meditating under a tree. The next day, the news spread in the neighborhood that a great sage was staying in the garden. People gathered there and saluted him with offerings of fruit, flowers, and sweets. Many also offered silver and copper coins. How strange, thought the fisherman. I am not a genuine holy man, and still people show such devotion to me. I shall certainly realize God if I become a true sadhu. There is no doubt about it. Unquote. If a mere pretense of religious life can bring such spiritual awakening, you can imagine the effect of real sadhana. In that state, you will surely realize what is real and what is unreal. God alone is real, and the world is illusory. So that's a beautiful story. And sometimes Sri Ramakrishna would tell it with a little more elaboration or slightly differently. But again, the fisherman came to steal fish from a lake belonging to some landowner. And the landowner heard the thief casting his net into the water. And so he called his servants, and they got their torches and came out to catch the thief. They made a circle around where they had heard the noise so the thief couldn't escape. And they found no one there. They just found the net itself lying in the water. But then they saw over to the side under a tree a sadhu seated, smeared with ashes, as sadhus do. And the lucky thing for the thief is that in India, to dress up as a sadhu means dressing down. You don't have to have a special suit to wear to be a sadhu. That is, a sadhu can be naked, or he can just wear a kopinam, just a simple cloth around his loins. And so you don't have to go find a clerical collar or a cassock or anything like that. So the sadhu smeared himself with ashes, sat naked or half naked under the tree, pretending to meditate. And then people began to come the next day and to tell others that, oh, there's a holy man living in the garden here. And so the sadhu was, not the sadhu, the thief was struck with the fact that I'm just pretending. I'm not a sadhu at all. I'm just pretending, and yet I get all of this respect. So sometimes Sri Ramakrishna would embellish the story by saying that the sadhu realized that people were showing him so much respect that he couldn't give up the pretense now, because then it'll be found out that he's a hypocrite. And so he continued, and gradually he became a holy man. Just by pretending to be a holy man, he actually turned into a holy man. And so there's a great lesson in that also. He doesn't extend the story like that here, but the extension itself, which his own extension, is valuable because it shows that that really is what spiritual practice does. We're trying to be spiritual, not as an outer show. Of course, that we should not understand, because many people do misunderstand spirituality that way, and they make an outer show, whereas inside there's nothing there. No, that's just hypocrisy. So the idea isn't that we should pretend to other people that we're spiritual. No, we should internally pretend. And then gradually we find that we are approximating that which we are pretending inwardly to be. The imitation becomes the reality. If the imitation is based on a higher reality, and if our imitation is internal rather than external, just to fool people for show, that has no value whatsoever. But internal imitation is one of the great methods of spiritual life. That, in fact, is what, to a slightly different direction, but similar, is what Lila Dhyana is all about. That is meditating on the divine play of God. We take something from like with Sri Ramakrishna, something from the life of Sri Ramakrishna, or from the life of Holy Mother or Swamiji, and we imagine it and put it in our imagination. We put ourselves in the scene and imagine that we are there, seated with them, talking to them. Oh, well, that's just imagination. But it has great power to change the nature of our mind, change the nature of our aspiration, to call up real devotion. And so by pretending, or say I want to develop unselfishness, and yet I, the ego, want to develop unselfishness. So how can the ego develop unselfishness? Well, you can do it by trying to imitate what it would be like to be unselfish. So if there's a chance to help someone, part of you may say, well, why should I bother? I don't care about this person. I don't want to put myself out. But part of you wants to be spiritual, and that part becomes stronger. And so you say, well, maybe I don't feel like doing it, but I should. So let me act as though I want to do it. Again, internally, not for show. Then I do what I think I should do as an unselfish person. And gradually that awakens genuine unselfishness in me. So yes, that's the ego wanting to be egoless, but it works. And so this is a wonderful story about the thief who pretended to be a sadhu. One of the devotees said to himself, now who could that possibly be? It of course has to be M, the author of the gospel, because otherwise how would M know what somebody was thinking to himself? So this is a device M often uses in the gospel. One of the devotees said to himself, is the world unreal then? The fisherman, to be sure, renounced worldly life. What then will happen to those who live in the world? Must they renounce it? Sri Ramakrishna, who could see into a man's innermost thought, said very tenderly, suppose an office clerk has been sent to jail. He undoubtedly leads a prisoner's life there. But when he is released from jail, does he cut capers in the street? Not at all. He gets a job as a clerk again and goes on working as before. Even after attaining knowledge through the Guru's grace, one can very well live in the world as a Jivan Mukta. Unquote. Thus did Sri Ramakrishna reassure those who were living as householders. So this was a problem that continually arose in the minds of some of Sri Ramakrishna's householder devotees, those who were more sincere. Sri Ramakrishna would praise and exalt the life of renunciation and everything. And so some like M, Girish Ghosh also, Nag Mahashoy, they would come to Sri Ramakrishna and tell him that they wanted to renounce the world. And Sri Ramakrishna told those that no, the Divine Mother has work for you to do. You must live in the world and show householders the way. So again, this in the gospel itself, you'll see that this thought comes to M several times. Finally, Sri Ramakrishna gets irritated with him for asking so many times after Sri Ramakrishna had told him that no, you're to live in the world and show the way to householders, that Sri Ramakrishna said, well, if you want to renounce the world, renounce the world. What does the Divine Mother need with people like you? If she wants, she can take up anybody to do her work. It's a blessing to you that she wanted you to do it. And so then with that, M gave up the thought of renouncing the world from then on. But he lived an ideal, the life of an ideal householder, which did and still does show the way to those who live in the world. So again, this was, I believe, as far as I remember, this is the first time that this thought comes to him, where he thinks that he's has a wife, he has children, he has parents to take care of, etc. Or not take care of, but he's responsible for his parents. Yet he, because of his growing devotion, when Sri Ramakrishna praises the life of renunciation, then he thinks, well, is that the only way? Is that what I should do? So Sri Ramakrishna tells him no, that just as a clerk in an office gets arrested for something, put in jail, but when he comes out of jail, then he goes back to being a clerk. And so if you have devotion, yes, you may live in the household, you may have responsibilities and so forth for family and to society and so forth. But that devotion will remain, whether you're in the household or out of the household. That will stay. It won't. The living in the household won't destroy your spiritual life. And so, as M says, thus did Sri Ramakrishna reassure those who are living as householders. Manilal, sir, where shall I meditate on God when I perform my daily worship? Master, why, the heart is a splendid place. Meditate on God there. Manilal, a member of the Brahmo Samaj, Manilal, a member. Well, let me stop on what I just read. Why, the heart is a splendid place. Meditate on God there. Why are we often instructed to meditate on God in the heart? Now, even in our tradition, there are gurus who give different instructions, but the most common is that the guru says to meditate in the heart. Or even if we're told to meditate on God seated in front of us, facing us, we're often told to think that there is the stem of the lotus on which God is seated in front of us. It comes out of the heart. And so why the heart? Because there is a psychic center to our being here. Our sense of identity is connected with the heart. Even though our thinking takes place here, behind the eyes and between the ears, because the brain here, and 4 of the 5 sense organs are right here. The 5th is the skin, which is all over the body, but 4 of the senses are located here: seeing, hearing, smelling, and tasting. And so we feel that we're located behind the eyes because of the prominence of the eyes and the prominence of the ears in bringing us knowledge of the outer world. Smell and taste are much less dominant. But as I've said on occasion, when I want to point to myself, say I do something good and somebody asks, who did this? And I say, oh, I did it. Then I don't say I did it. I say I did it. We instinctively feel that this is the center of my psychic being. Even though my thinking seems to be up here, this is the center of my psychic being. So whatever I place within my heart, in my imagination, and do that over time consistently, then that begins to change my very sense of self-being. It transforms my sense of self by thinking of a bright, luminous spiritual figure here in the heart. So the heart is a splendid place. Meditate on God there. Let's see, the next. Yes, I'll stop here because the next part goes on for a couple of paragraphs, one of which is a large paragraph. And so instead of getting into that, let me stop here and we'll begin again next week with Manilal. So now let me give announcements, and then if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take those. But the announcements are that on Sunday, I will speak on the goddess Durga, because Durga Puja is coming up later this month. And so in the series that I've started on gods and goddesses, I want to speak this Sunday on the goddess Durga. The history of the appearance of Durga, the manifestation of Durga, the meaning of Durga, etc., and the meaning of her worship. On next Tuesday, we'll continue the Gita class at 7:30 Tuesday evening. And next Thursday, we'll continue this class again at the same time, 11 o'clock in the morning. And then not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, the Saturday of next week, the 17th of October, then we will have our annual Durga Puja. And so as probably all of you know by now, unless this is the first time you're tuning in, we will have our Durga Puja here in the chapel. Normally, we set up a large tent or 2 large tents outside, and we have over 700 people that come in recent years and attend the Durga Puja. That we can't do because of the pandemic, and so we will have the puja here, and it will be live streamed. We will not allow a live audience in the chapel because of the pandemic. But it will be live streamed, so you can get it where you are now on YouTube. And it will begin at 10 o'clock. I said the other day that it would be 9:30, but I rethought it, and so we'll start at 10 o'clock. So it'll go from 10 until 12. Probably by 12 will be the arati, the waving of the lights, marking the end of the puja. And then for those who wish to come after the arati is over, and of course you can come to the parking lot before that if you wish, but after the arati is over, we'll have volunteers here who will allow family groups one by one to come in through the front door bow to the image and make a flower offering if they wish, and then go out through the exit or the side door and around the sidewalk back to the parking lot. So that way we can have strict social distancing. Everyone will be required to wear a mask when they come in to see the image. So again, the puja will start October 17th, which is Saturday, at 10 o'clock. And by, say, after the arati, by 12:15 or something, then people can come in, offer a flower, bow down, and we'll give some prasad in hand. Not as we normally do with a full meal, sit-down meal, but some fruit and sweet prasad we'll give that you can take home to eat. So we hope that as many as possible can come for the watching online and then coming to see the image. So now for questions, Subhash asks, could you please elaborate on conflicting views of whether all karma is burnt up after God realization? For example, that is Shankara or the Gita chapter 437. Gyan Agni Sarva Karman Bhasmat Kurute Tara. So, yes, the idea is that for the person who attains to the highest knowledge or the highest devotion, but is liberated in life through the highest knowledge or the highest devotion, which meet at the top. Their expressions may be different to the people who follow the path of devotion and follow the path of knowledge, who attain to the full illumination and liberation. When they come back, they may express that illumination different according to their different temperaments, which they had before. But their karma is burnt up. So, as you know, there is what is called, what is the common term, the karma, prarabdha karma. That is, that the karma which had set this life into motion, that has to exhaust itself. It's like the arrow which has already been shot from the bow. And so once it's shot, you can't bring it back. And so the karma which set this life into motion, it has to finish itself. And so it's said that a person who attains to full illumination, that remains. And so that's why we often see a liberated soul continues in the body for some time, for some years. Someone like Ramana Maharshi was fully illumined at the age of 16, and yet he lived to be 70. So all of those years he lived in a state of illumination. So from our standpoint, Ramana Maharshi and such people had to experience the fruits of their prarabdha karma, that which had set their life in motion. But from the liberated soul's perspective, it's quite different. They don't see any karma. They see that the body and mind are behaving according to the nature of the universe. They have nothing to do with it. They don't identify with it. And so we see people, illumined souls, experiencing prarabdha karma. The illumined soul doesn't see that. And so in that sense, from the illumined soul standpoint, there is no prarabdha karma. From our standpoint, the standpoint of ignorance, there is prarabdha karma. So what happens to those whose guru has departed the physical plane? Does he reappear at the right time? So the guru who has passed away, that does not break the link with the guru. The link with the guru is permanent. And so if the guru is needed, then the guru will reappear. And in our case, in our tradition, either the human guru who passed away might appear, or Sri Ramakrishna might appear, because Sri Ramakrishna is the true guru in our tradition. The human guru is the instrument of Sri Ramakrishna. So either the human guru may appear, or Sri Ramakrishna may come as the guru. But the link with the guru is there, and that will continue. So a devotee in St. Louis told me many years ago, this was about 1986, Swami Chaitanananda Ji had asked me to come and look after the St. Louis Center and to give the talks and classes while he was in India. So I did. I went in, I think in late August or just before Labor Day. and stayed for a couple of months, 2.5 months in St. Louis, giving lectures and classes. And so at that time, I got to know the close devotees very intimately. So one of them, a man whom I had known for many years before that, but never had the opportunity to get to know him closely, he told me of an experience he had with Swami Satprakashananda. In fact, he told me several, but one is pertinent here. When Swami Satprakashananda was very old and not coming downstairs anymore, he just stayed upstairs where his room was, and then there was a room where he would meet devotees. So this devotee came up to see him, and Swami Satprakashananda was sitting in a chair in his sitting room, and the devotee came and sat across from him. And so Swami Satprakashananda told him, when the disciple repeats the mantra given by the Guru, a thread of golden light connects the heart of the disciple to the heart of the Guru. And so as Swami Satprakashananda said that, this devotee, a householder devotee, who's now passed away, though his wife is still alive, this devotee told me that he saw a golden thread of light connecting his heart to Swami Satprakashananda. And he said after that also, when he would do japa, sometimes he would see that thread of golden light, the light of consciousness, connecting him to his Guru. And so he was very fortunate that the recipient of great grace, that Swami Satprakashananda showed that to him, so it became a reality. But it is a reality for us also, even if we don't see it. So with that, I will... one more question. How should one look upon one's Guru? Yes, Dankruti. How should one look upon one's Guru? One should look upon one's Guru as the channel of God, its divinity itself. Sri Ramakrishna said that Satchidananda alone is the Guru. And that just as you have on old medieval buildings, whether in India, they weren't medieval buildings in India, but in old buildings in Europe or in India, and sometimes old buildings on the East Coast here usually is where you see it. There'd be gargoyles or some sort of animal figure, a lion or something, a head on the a masonry head or a stone head on the edges of the building, and the rainwater would fall on the roof and come down into the gutter and then out through the mouth of the lion or the gargoyle or whatever. So Sri Ramakrishna said that the human Guru is like the gargoyle, but the water is like Satchidananda. So the water of Satchidananda comes through the human Guru to us. And so we should look on the Guru as the channel of divine power itself. And the instruction that comes from the Guru comes from the divine itself. And so to not make much of the Guru's personality or maybe eccentricities that the Guru might have, or the physical body of the Guru, but look on the Guru as the mouthpiece of God when the Guru gives spiritual instructions. So that is the best way to look on the Guru. And again, in our tradition, we are taught that the Guru is the one who channels the power of Sri Ramakrishna. So that doesn't mean in your practical matters, if the Guru doesn't know carpentry or something and they make a suggestion that why don't you do it this way, and you know that that's not a practical way to do it, then you explain to the Guru, no, that's not the way that you use a hammer, or not the way that you use a saw. But in spiritual instruction, then we take that. I say that because if you're driving the car with your Guru and the Guru doesn't know driving, and the Guru tells you to do something that's very dangerous in traffic, then you have to say, Maharaj, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That will cause an accident. So don't think, oh, my Guru has spoken, so I'm going to do what he said and thereby cause an accident. No. But in spiritual matters, the words of the Guru are to be taken as coming from the divine itself. So with that, we will stop. And the announcement's already given, so I'll close with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anandarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat.